So unlike every, the output from map can be itself a list of lists. So map itself does not do any flattening of its result. It just takes, it conses whatever your function is of car of the list with a recursive call to map for the cdr of the list. Okay? So that's a little bit different from every that flattens things out for you into a sentence. Yes? Okay, the question is, in the file I loaded, there are two things called reverse. So how do I know which one I got? The answer is I got the second one. The same as if you find a bug in some program you wrote, and so you type in a new version, the new version replaces the old version. Right? So it's the same thing. It defined the first reverse, and then it said, okay, here's a different definition for reverse, and now that's the new one. Okay? And ordinarily, you wouldn't do this. And I don't want you to learn this as a programming technique. Right? It's just a lecturing technique. Sorry? Yeah, use the last one. But guys, don't focus your attention on what does scheme do in stupid, complicated edge cases that you shouldn't allow to happen. Right? Basically, if you have two definitions for the same thing in the same file, it's because you're confused. And it almost doesn't matter what scheme does, because it's unlikely to be what you meant. Okay? So just don't let it happen. Yes? Could you rewrite a pen? Yes, absolutely. Using cons, car, and cdr. Of course you could, yeah. I'm not sure I understand the question. Are you saying you want to write, you want to change the meaning of append? I think actually there's a definition for append using cons. Get used to calling it cons in the book. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, say it again. Okay. The question is, in the map example that's right here on the screen, if my list of lists includes just a word, what would happen? Well, we can do that. What? What? Oh. What? I hate computers. I really do. In this silly terminal program, I have to type Control-Shift-Copy to copy something. Anyway, here's what happens. It applies but first to the word, and it gets ELP. So the general answer is it depends on the function that you use as the first argument to map. So every element of the list that you give as the second argument must be in the domain of the first function, and of that, first argument. So in this case, the first argument was but first, and its domain is words and sentences. So I can have a list of words and sentences. If I used plus, well, no. Square root. Map square root over a list. It had better be a list of numbers and nothing else. Okay? If I say map car, it had better be a list of lists, because it's going to try to take care of all of them. Okay? So it's up to that function. Was there a hand up here? No. Oh, yes. Right. The question is, in the example without help, where I have a list of sentences, why do I choose to see it as a list of sentences rather than just as a list of lists and use cdr? Say map cdr over those things. I could do that. It really depends on the context. So if somebody asks you to write a program, they're going to specify the data structures that you're working with. So I could say, you're given a list of rational numbers, and you'd like to know the greatest common denominator. So as the first step of that, you're going to find all the denominators. And you would do that not by saying map cdr over the list of fractions, but map denominator, in order to be following the abstraction, even though cdr would do the same thing and it would work. Okay, so you just, if you're designing the data structure, then you get to choose. But you should be consistent. You shouldn't sometimes use cdr and other times use but first on the same structure. Okay, that's just a style point. Okay, any other questions before I move on to the next exciting topic? Yes, thank you. If you replace map with every, well, let's try it and see. Technically, it's illegal, because the domain of every is words and sentences and not lists of sentences. But it might work. Let's see what happens. That's what happens. So every didn't complain. It applied but first to each element of the list. But instead of using cons as the combiner, it uses sentence as the combiner. So it has a flattening effect. So yeah, you might want to do that. That's a situation where you're really going to feel torn. You're going to say, boy, every would do just what I want. But I know that it's a data abstraction violation to call every on a list of lists. So what am I going to do? And the right answer is you're going to say, apply append So we call map. The result is a list of lists, which isn't what you want, and you call append. So apply is a function that takes a function and a list of arguments and calls that function with all those arguments. So it's like appending all the pieces of the list of lists that map gave you. So this is the data abstraction respectful way to do it instead of using every. Right? Yeah. Why do you have to say apply append? Because the result from map is one list of lists. If you apply append to one argument, it doesn't do anything. Okay? You want to call append with the first argument being loves you, and the second argument being want to tell you, and so on. So you want to call append with 3 arguments. And that's what apply does. It takes this list of arguments and calls the function with those things as arguments. Okay? Yes? Can you append something with an empty list? Sure, but it's not going to help you any. Can you append, if you append whatever you get from map with the empty list, you will get back whatever you get from map, the list of lists. Because it takes the elements of the list of lists, which are lists, and makes a list out of those elements. So appending with the empty list doesn't help. A lot of these things, by the way, you should be playing with stuff like this. Just, every once in a while, fire up Scheme and ask yourself questions like this. I wonder what happens if I try such and such and see. So, one of the nice things about studying computer science, as opposed to maybe math, is that often you don't have to ask the teacher whether you got the right answer. You can just ask the computer.